Hey everyone, thanks for joining in. I'm Peter Askim. I'm the artistic director of the next Festival of Emerging Artists. We're in the middle of our great 4-week season of online events with great guest artists and thinkers, workshops, sessions, conversations, and I'm really glad that you could all join us today. So we just had a great presentation on with Rob Deemer. Glad you can be here. We have fantastic events coming up later on today with James Dargan, Anthony Davis, and tonight we have a really interesting workshop called Miraculous Futures. I think we could all use one of those right now after the last 3 months. So anyway, I'm really excited to introduce to you Flutronix. So Nathalie Joachim and Allison Loggins-Hull. They're both great composers, flutists, entrepreneurs, and thinkers. Allison and I had a great time working on some music of hers. We were lucky to be commissioned an orchestra piece from hers that hopefully we'll get to premiere some time, but just to be able to work on bringing that to life was really fantastic. And I'm really excited to have both of them join us today and glad to have you all here. So Allison and Nathalie, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for being with us today. Really looking forward to talking with you all. So Natalie and I thought that we would just kind of give you a little background story as to who we are, how we came together, share with you some of our business ventures as they relate to our ensemble, talk about some projects that we have going on, both together as Flutronix and individually, and then see if you all have any questions for all the different things that we talk about. So I thought I would just get started and give you a little kind of our little love story on how we met and came together. So as you all know, we're both flute players and we've been playing the flute for a very long time and both kind of grew up in the New York City tri-state area. But what's really funny about that is that her and I actually didn't know each other when we were younger and coming of age, which is really odd because it's a very kind of like tight, small circle of young people who are studying classical music in the New York area at a certain level. And also the fact that we play the same instrument, it's a little weird that we never cross paths in like master classes or competitions or things like that. So we didn't know each other until later on when we were both, we had both graduated from our undergrad. And it was during the time when I was personally not really sure where I was going with my flute playing. I was pretty convinced that I didn't want a kind of quote unquote traditional career playing the flute as a classical flutist. I had interest in that, but definitely beyond that. And I definitely had a creative streak that I really wanted to explore and somehow implement into my life as a musician. But I didn't really know how or I was going to do that or what exactly I was going to do. So during this time when our paths finally crossed, I was kind of experimenting with like improv, dabbling in that, which kind of which definitely led to composing music and experimenting with like technology and electronics. So I had built a MySpace artist page. I don't even know if you young people know what MySpace is. Really dating myself here, but it was a great kind of tool for independent artists and musicians to get their music out there and to network. So I built a MySpace artist page and shared a few of my works on that. And one day I got a message from this young woman around the same age as me, who was also playing the flute. And I noticed
I'm
that we had.
younger. She doesn't want to say that, but I'm younger. I just like to make sure everybody knows.
Thank you, Natalie. Thank you. Yes, she likes to remind me that on a regular basis. Yes, she's a year younger than me. So anyway, so we were approximately the same age. And she reached out to me, and I saw that, you know, we had a lot of connections in terms of like mutual friends and things like that. So, and I saw that she was a flute player, so I didn't think she was a creep or anything. So she reached out to me, and she said like, hey, you know, I'm a flutist, I'm in Brooklyn, you know, I see you're experimenting with using technology and electronics, and like, I'm doing something very similar. Why don't we know each other? We should meet. And I say, yeah, we should know each other. Like, this is kind of silly. So I literally just, we had a few exchanges, and I said, why don't you come on over and we'll just like meet and hang out and talk. And it was revealed that she actually lived in my neighborhood, like down the street, which is even like more bonkers, that we had never, you know, our paths had never crossed. So she walked on over, and I let her in my apartment, and we hung out. And it's so funny because today we laugh about it, because like, I would never recommend that you meet someone on the internet and just invite them to your house. But I don't know, I had a really good feeling about her, and thankfully it worked out. So, so she came over, and we just, you know, we just literally just hung out. We tried to get to know each other. We talked a lot about our experiences as young flutists and our studies, and how we were both in this place where, you know, we had all this classical training and love for playing the flute, but we had, you know, so much interest and just kind of like want to engage in other types of music making. So it was just like we were vibing like very, very strongly, and just kind of like agreeing with one another, and not just on flute and music, but on other things too. So we had a very good just like connection immediately, and concluded at the end of like a few hours that we needed to work together, and we should, you know, put our heads together to kind of, you know, create this thing where we're playing our flutes and we're making music and we're using electronics, and to see where it goes. So literally, I feel like we started working like the next day. We've been working ever since. And that was over 10 years ago now. You know, I think even maybe like 11 or so. I don't know. It's been a while. So yeah, we started working immediately, and it became very clear right away that we had to build a lot of things from the ground up, because there wasn't a group like us at the time. There wasn't any much repertoire for, you know, two flutes and electronics. And there weren't, I don't know, it seemingly we had to figure out how to create performance opportunities for ourselves too. We had this very like different kind of thing going on. So our meetings became very like business oriented right away. We had to figure out a good name for ourselves that was like clear and, you know, kind of made it very clear like who we were and what we were trying to do, so people didn't have to like think too hard and be like, what is this? We came up with a logo. We worked with a graphic designer so we could, you know, establish our branding very early on, and create something that we loved and that we felt represented our like aesthetic and our vibe like right away, and that could stand the test of time. And we figured like, whoa, we got to write a lot of music too, so we have something for these shows. So we realized we had all these different kinds of, I guess you could say like departments of business that we had to build, including like the performance and creating the music, which eventually led to publishing the music, which I'll talk a little bit more about later. And we were also very committed to being educators in our work, and it was really important for us to make sure that was a part of our endeavors. So we had to think about how we would get out there as educators as well, and design workshops and things like that. So we'll get into like all of those different avenues, I guess you could say, that make up Flutronix. But that's really how we came together, and we've been going pretty hard like ever since, and things have really blossomed and grown into quite a business really that we're both like super proud of, and still like 100% committed to. So I think now we can kind of get a little bit more focus about each of those areas. So maybe Natalie, if you want to jump in and start talking about some of those exciting things.
Yes, definitely. So yeah, we started, can everyone hear me? Yes, okay, good. We started, as Allison mentioned, just sort of building from the ground up. And a lot of that came, I see that on here that there are a few of our sort of like old school flute fans that are on here right now, which is great to see you guys here. But a lot of that grew out of responding to the flute community, which was really where we started building our following, which has obviously since really expanded. The first facet of what we do, and one of the primary facets of what we do, of course, now, like Allison said, 10 years later, you sort of grow into what is a little bit of an enterprise of managing all of these different facets of our business. The primary one, of course, is that we are first and foremost performers and also composers. So we realized right away, not only that we had individual skills as composers, but pretty early on started co-composing as well. And the performing, especially when we first started, was really centered around our community in New York. And that was about not only creating performance opportunities for ourselves, but in addition to that, really creating performance space and opportunity for our community. So we were curating concert series throughout New York City, which was really amazing, where we would invite a lot of our colleagues to come in and share the new work that they were creating alongside our new work. And that was a way for us to, again, create community around what we were doing, but also create opportunity for ourselves. And then pretty soon thereafter, we started, again, reaching out specifically to the flute community, reaching out to universities, reaching out to the flute clubs across the country, tapping into the resources that we knew we had as a community, to start doing some concert touring and masterclass and education work throughout the country. And that has continued to really build, which is really wonderful. That work also led us to see that a lot of other flutists were interested in playing the music that we were writing. As Allison mentioned, when we first started, there was almost no music written for two flutes and electronics at the time. That was our number one challenge, was that we were excited to start this group and we had no music to play. So we started writing it ourselves, really just for us, and then realized that there was this interest, again, coming at us from our community. So I like to emphasize this just because I think it's really important to let it be known that our expansion of our business was really in response to our community and people who were supporting us at that time. So we knew not that much at all about publishing, but we knew that there was an interest for other flutists to play our work. And that very quickly led us into the world of publishing. Again, that was really just for our sort of Flutronix projects at the beginning, but now not just the performance, but also the composing has expanded to encompass both of our individual professional careers as well. So whereas we really started as just a performing entity, really just focused on Flutronix, as our individual careers grew, which we were both always in support of, we made sure that we could also, as an entity, support each other. So both of our individual works now, whether they're Flutronix-centered projects or not, are all published under the umbrella of Flutronix. Allison will get into more. She's our publishing guru. she's our spreadsheet guru. So I'm going to let her talk about that. But it is, I think, important to know that we are supporting each other as composers in that way. And beyond that, most of our performance work is also in many ways falling under the umbrella of Flutronix, in that we are both stepping in and helping each other deeply on our own performance projects as artistic advisors. Allison was a co-producer on my last album, really using the skills that we were able to develop through our work with Flutronix to support each other now, again, in this expansive way, which is really wonderful. I think when you have a synergy like this, with a working synergy like this with someone, it's kind of wonderful. I feel really grateful that I have someone who I know I trust. I know she knows my music. I know we can be honest with one another. And I know we work well together to sort of bring along as our careers continue to flourish and grow. So that has also become a really expansive part of our our business. I will also say briefly that we started putting out recordings pretty early on as well. And all of that was a huge undertaking, not just fundraising for those projects. We ran several very successful Kickstarter campaigns online for our earlier records, and put out a few other records in addition to that, but again are now really supporting each other in that way. We have co-produced everything that we put out, which I think is unusual for a lot of artists, in that we really have maintained over the course of the past decade or so, really have maintained. Thanks, Basu. I see you. Basu says incredible. Flutronix is incredible. But yeah, we've really managed to maintain artistic ownership over our work. And that has really led to not only creative power, but financial power, and has really allowed us to grow in a way that I think a lot of other groups don't actually always get to do, because as you're expanding, you sort of bring in help, or you work with a label, or etc. So we were really a DIY operation from the beginning that has continued to expand. As Allison mentioned, education is very important to us. We really feel, both of us, I think, really feel that it is important for students at every level to see and hear us, because we do think that that's something that we didn't have when we were growing up. That it wasn't until, for me, it really wasn't until I got to college that I had other experiences with other Black flutists. I had, of course, heard of Bobby Humphrey and Hubert Laws, but in the classical world, we were few and far between. And I do think that had I seen a Flutronix when I was in fourth grade, I would have had a very different idea of what a career could look like and what a life as an artist could look like. So education has always been paramount for us. We started very early on, primarily at the university level, talking about entrepreneurship, how we were building our business with one another, and how we operate as a business. And then we started to expand to younger students, which was really amazing, developing signature education programs in collaboration with schools and different partnerships throughout New York City, and also again across the country. So that became really valuable for us, not only as a source of revenue, but as an opportunity to continue to support the community that had supported us for so long. Now our education work has expanded to the point where we have a very deep and ongoing long-term relationship with the Juilliard School, who have an international network of schools that house their curriculum across the globe. One of our last international trips was teaching in Qatar for 2 weeks, where we worked with about 1,600 students over the course of just under 2 weeks. Again, presenting our signature education programs, which we're always continuing to develop, changing along with the work that we're doing. And that feels really wonderful to be able to work with that many young students. We've done workshops for kids everywhere from, even now, I think we say K through 12 and university, but we have done kids younger. I remember a very vibrant group back in February, and who I think were about 3 years old. So I think that's preschool at that stage. So, and we've managed to get students at every level composing, thinking about music in a really creative and collaborative way. And that has really been a big part of our ongoing mission. So those are two really big facets of what we do: performing, composing, recording, educating. And I'll let Allison take over publishing, which is surprisingly our highest income generator, which is, and especially passive income. I think, what we have. Yeah, we've decided really that, especially since our work, we'll talk a little bit more about our projects in a moment, but our work has really become very focused on social change and long-term engagement with communities. So we're not really a touring machine like many ensembles. We're also not a commissioning machine, because we write most of our music ourselves. So publishing has become a huge source of revenue for us to sort of keep us alive and fund our general operating as we continue to grow.
Yeah. I want to talk about it a little bit. I don't want to take up too much time because we also have like a lot of other things we want to talk to you about. But I do want to mention, or just kind of like reiterate what Nathalie said. We found like over time, there was like a really growing demand for our music, for people to, other flutists in the beginning anyway, to purchase our music and perform it on their own. And we were like, oh, okay, I guess that's what we're doing now. Why not? So when we first started, of course, like a lot of things we had no experience doing. And there was a huge learning curve. We first tried to actually print out scores ourselves, and then we realized that was like way too much of an undertaking. But we also acknowledged that a lot of, at that time anyway, like more and more performers were starting to, use iPads and read their music digitally anyway. So we were like, well, why don't we make our music available just for digital downloads only? That seems to be kind of the direction of, all publishing, not just music, but like books and everything. So we decided to abandon the printing of the music for now at that time, and switch over to a digital format. And we built an online store that's on our website, and learned all about how to register our works with a performing rights organization, and we chose ASCAP in this case. So we've been registered with ASCAP for years now, and just over this time learned about, not just the publishing of our music and the selling of it, but also about like performance royalties and making sure that performances of your music by other people are reported to ASCAP so you can actually get those royalties, which can be a really nice source of passive income, which Nathalie mentioned already, and also about how to license your music and what that means. So things like mechanical licenses and sync licenses. And there's so much I could say about like publishing. It's like this whole other beast. And oftentimes it gets confused with recordings as well. There's like a lot of confusion between, like if, I have this music on an album, do I still have to get a license, or versus like I'm performing this music? It can get a little like cloudy. And I want to give you guys an opportunity if you have any questions about that, but I think maybe I'll save it to the end. Because I'm, if there's any composers here who are interested in that, because I do want to move on to start talking about the work that we're currently producing and how we are working creatively these days, which has really evolved from when we first got together. We first got together, like I mentioned, we were young, we were not really, 100% certain where things were going. We just knew that we loved making music, and that's what we wanted to do. And we did it. And over time, as we got older, that the kind of, I guess, maybe, I don't know, I don't want to say like purpose, but the meaning and the direction of the music that we're making has kind of transformed a little bit. And that came about because maybe mostly after the most recent presidential election, like Nathalie and I, we would have our administrative meetings and talks, and we were having a very difficult time actually being productive because we were so just distraught and like disturbed about what was going on right here in our country. It really felt like there was a major disconnect between people, a serious lack of understanding. I know, me personally, I was, I don't know, I was very kind of not shocked, but a little taken aback at how things were, the direction that things seemed to be headed, and I thought they were going a different way. So I realized that there was a lot that I didn't really understand what was going on. So, with all this like frustration that we had and anxiety and just, general like concern for what was going on, we decided to kind of like channel that into our work and start, investigating like people's stories and narratives and experiences and tell those and share those stories like through our work in an effort to facilitate better understanding amongst people and our audiences, because it just felt like we felt I guess kind of a responsibility to use our talents in that way to try to shed light on these experiences that people have, because it just felt like there was a real absence of that, and we were just not getting one another. So these discussions led to this major project that we've been involved in for the past, I guess, 2 years now, with ourselves and with the Carolina Performing Arts. I'll let Nathalie tell you more about it, but it's our first real major kind of social change initiative, and we're super proud of it and have really like committed to continue working in this way moving forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I will dive in to tell you about that project, which is we're calling Discourse. A lot of that work stemmed from a lot of the process for the work, for me anyway, really stemmed from how I began working on my own project from IT, which we can talk about later, which was again really about getting out and connecting individually and directly with people. I think at the time I had also just come off of reading a fantastic book called The Warmth of Other Suns, which I highly recommend, by Isabel Wilkerson, in which it's the first definitive history of the Great Migration which took place in the United States, of course, one of the largest migrations of people ever to happen in history. And the book was written, I think, in 2010, and kind of insane that it took that long to get that history out, and also quite revealing. Isabel Wilkerson does this beautiful job of connecting or contextualizing history through individual stories. So you sort of follow the stories of 3 individuals at 3 different points in time. In America, there's a link to the book, thanks Peter, in the chats now. And it's what I found so striking about it was that it's really hard to look away from someone's story or to separate it from the contextualization of its history when you're connecting to the individual, to them, to their families, to what they live day to day, and in a way that is very different than if you try to contextualize a whole group of people or a mass of people, right? And as Allison mentioned, we were really feeling this deep disconnect. So we had a desire to shift our focus. It was maybe the first call to action that we had in our own work. So much of the beginning part of Flutronix was about, again, just bare bones, we got to build repertoire. It wasn't really about anything, just we like this music and we need music to play, so here we go. And this for us was our first sort of personal call to action, to think about taking a step back from touring and thinking about what we could do to really have an impact as artists, not as activists, but as artists through our work. So we were approached by Carolina Performing Arts, which is the performing entity at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. And the director there, Amy Collings-Russell, was very interested in having us come down and do a project or commission us to do some kind of work. And we were fearful, I have to say, because we were like, we have talked about this a lot. We're really committed to this idea that we want to do a project that for us will be an experiment. We've never really worked in this way before. And we want the project to be centered around embedding ourselves in a community, really building true relationships with people. And much to our surprise, which now in retrospect, Carolina Performing Arts actually has a lot of work like this happening, which is beautiful, that they're really committed to this kind of work and activism through the arts. So they decided to commission Discourse from us. What Discourse has involved has been, as Allison mentioned, over the past 2 years, we've really embedded ourselves deeply in the community of Chapel Hill, North Carolina, and the surrounding area. In the time that we've been there, we have done everything from break bread with people at their dinner tables to engaging in community activities to inviting people into our own artistic process, including workshops for children, a lot of those education workshops we mentioned, but also inviting them into the process of creating this work of art centered around the stories of this community. Through the years, we've had an opportunity to build relationships with everyone from the indigenous population there, the homeless population, the youth population, historically Black communities throughout the region, but of course also scholars and students from the University of North Carolina Chapel Hill campus. And that has been really wonderful. I think what's a gift about the project is that it does require really deep personal interaction with people. I like to say that the music is a little bit of a byproduct because most of our time has been spent collecting oral history, also in partnership with the Southern Oral History Program, which is a program out of UNC Chapel Hill that houses an archive of over 6,000 stories of people living in the American South. For us, it was a very beautiful thing, especially being two people from outside of that community. We felt like it was important to have individual conversations with people to really get to know them because we have a lot in common, but we're also outsiders. And I think the last thing that you want to do is step into someone's house and tell them that you're going to use their story to make a show out of it. And the show itself has really turned into a sonic representation of this community, really centering the stories, uplifting the value of the individual story in the same way that Isabel Wilkerson did, in this really beautiful way that I think, we were confident that we could make music that people were going to like and that they were going to listen to. That was something we had experience doing, but working so carefully with these people and their actual real stories in real life was heart-opening for us, has been heart-opening for us in this moment, has become very valuable. The show itself was supposed to premiere in April of 2020. Obviously, that hasn't happened, but what's been really beautiful is that in this very trying moment that we're all living through, this project has really continued to serve as a vehicle for us to connect with communities that really need help, to see how the project can expand and grow as a result of the changes that are happening to all of us in real time right now. And so we're already in talks with Carolina Performing Arts to talk about how the project has to evolve in response to this moment that we're all living through. So for us, I know for me, definitely has become a project that has shown its true value in this extremely challenging moment. Beyond that, we sort of started telling more people about this project, which was great. And a lot of people, we will be touring the Chapel Hill version as its own show, but a lot of people across the country have started wanting their own version of it. What's true is that we are learning that every single city, every single town, every single village, every single person has a different story. And each of these stories really reveals something regionally very different about American history and what people experience, right? So we are now in talks with the University of Chicago to do a version here, which I assure you will sound very different than the stories of Chapel Hill. It's our first major city that we're going to do the project in, so that's huge. We've done early work and early workshopping in Bentonville, Arkansas. Again, another part of the country with a very different demographic, a very different piece of American history attached to it. And our hope with this work, and also doing the same work down in New Orleans with New Orleans Museum of Art and a few smaller organizations down there. So this seems like it could be a life's work that we could do for a very long time. And we're hoping that we'll create this sort of sonic quilt of all of these different communities around America by connecting individually with people and keeping it open to the community. I think beyond that, what I will say is that we are really, more than anything, through this work, hoping that we can foster a sense of collectivity within these communities. Also sort of, strengthen their sense of community. What we've learned in Chapel Hill is that so many of these people have been living right next to one another and not known each other's stories at all. It's a little bit of sort of getting to know your neighbors in this broad view type of way. And, and again, revealing a sort of more true understanding of American history and how all of our stories connect with one another by centering our practice on the valuing of individual stories and connecting with people one by one. And it seems small, I think I've said many times in this moment that what's happening in the world can make you feel really small, but each one of these individual connections does really make you feel like you are learning to see and hear people in a very different way. It has certainly made me walk through my everyday life in a brand new way. So not beyond, and in addition to that, has really enriched our collective artistic practice, which is really wonderful.
Yeah. I just want to add, we should also say that we're actually performing a few excerpts from Discourse as part of the New Music Gathering. We're doing a headlining concert, which is online, of course, which is a week from today, next Tuesday at 9 p.m., I believe. And you can go to the New Music Gathering website to register, but we're doing 3 pieces from Discourse if you'd like to get a taste of what we've been working on. I just want to also mention another project that we are starting that is in this vein of social consciousness and in action. It's a piece that's very much in the early stages of development called Black Bean, and we're super, super excited about it. We're working with a great team of people. Right now, it looks like it'll premiere in June of 2021, COVID willing, at the Arts Club of Chicago, who are our commissioners. And this project is really about exploring Black feminism, specifically in an evening length performance, and the complexities of Black feminism as it toes both racial and gender lines, and also exploring how, like, historically speaking, Black women in this country anyway have been excluded from the whole of the feminist movement, which is a really complex and interesting history there. So we're excited to do that. We're writing for an expanded ensemble again. We are working with a poet named Jackie Shelton Green, who is the poet laureate of North Carolina, actually, and just a stunning writer, whose words are super powerful. And our job is to set music to her text. So we really have our work cut out for us, because she is just masterful. So we're really excited to be working with her. And our ensemble, it looks like, will include not only Flutronix and vocals, but drums and bass and keyboard. So we're really excited about that project, and hope you guys keep your eyes out on that. So we wanted to just talk also a little bit about some individual projects that we have going on, or that we have built. I'll just start quickly because, Peter's here. I've actually been working with Peter for a while now. He commissioned me for the Raleigh Civic Chamber Orchestra to write a short chamber orchestra piece, and it was supposed to premiere in April, but COVID. So we are, back to the drawing board on how we're going to do that. But I'm actually thankful for the time for some revisions. Anyway, so this piece, also kind of in the vein of exploring, social issues, is called The Inheritors, and explores the concept of generational trauma, which is the idea that you can inherit trauma experience from previous generations. So the literature, I read a couple different books that dive heavily into this subject matter, and there's a lot of research that has been done on this topic, and it's really quite fascinating. Both psychologists, psychiatrists, and philosophers and writers, all types of people have explored this topic. But there's a few different books that I used as source material. The first one being Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome by Dr. Joy DeGruy, and another one called The Inheritors: Moving Forward from Generational Trauma by Dr. Gita Bach, who I believe is with us today. Hi. And what was really interesting, I just want to make a few points about both of these works, and a lot of the research that I came across is that, you know, for those of us who are descendants of slaves and those of us who are descendants of victims of the Holocaust, there are a lot of things that are in common, and one of the a lot of behaviors that are in common. And one of the biggest one that I notice is that there is a tendency not to talk about the trauma. There's a tendency to kind of not necessarily pretend it didn't happen, but it's so traumatic and so bad that you just want to like kind of leave it there, you know. And I personally have experienced this within my own family. I remember, you know, trying to have conversations with my grandpa who grew up in Mississippi, and he and my grandmother were a part of that great migration that Nathalie mentioned. I remember, you know, trying to talk to him about growing up in Mississippi, and like he would not want to talk about it. He would just say like it was bad, you know, it was just a bad time, and quickly change the subject. And I've experienced those reactions a lot amongst family members. So I thought those parallels were really, really striking, and I tried to incorporate some of those ideas in the in the music. But yeah, hopefully Peter and I still have to figure out how we're going to do this, but hopefully we'll be able to present it in the near future, and share it with you all. We'll see. So fingers crossed.
Did you want to tell everybody about your Alarm Will Sound project? Any other projects?
There's so many projects. Yeah, okay. Well, briefly, thank you for reminding me. This was also supposed to premiere in the spring, in May, actually. I was co-creating a piece with my friend, who's a singer and songwriter named Toshi Regan. And this piece is called Love Always. And it started as I wanted to create the piece as a replacement for like a letter to my son. And this whole idea of writing a letter, specifically a letter that is meant to kind of help to teach you how to navigate in this world, especially as like a Black person in this country, came from when I read Ta-Nehisi Coates's, I'm drawing a blank.
Between the World and Me.
Thank you. Between the World and Me. Thank you. Which was, if you haven't read it, is a beautiful, beautiful letter, basically, that he wrote to his son about this very thing. And I'm not much of a writer. I'm not much of a words person. So, of course, you know, the way I can do this is through music. So the idea was to create songs that Toshi would sing with Alarm Will Sound, that are basically these letters to our young people, you know, to our loved ones, about how you can carry yourself in this world, and what you need to be careful about, and how sometimes just your existence is portrayed as a danger. So really just, you know, an effort to try to give tools to navigate and to survive. So that's a piece that consists of 3 songs. And I actually have a meeting this week to figure out how we're going to realize that. But hopefully, you know, that'll also come to life sooner than later as well. And there's a bunch of other stuff too, but I'll let Nathalie talk about her awesome projects now.
I won't go too deep into it, except that, you know, everybody here, I think, gets the point that, you know, I've really been working myself to sort of center my own practice around the telling of stories. My family is from Haiti. I come from a long line of storytellers. It's very much a part of our culture and our practice, in a way that we have, through our own language and through our own music, really harnessed and held on to the value of our history and our stories. Most of our cultural practice has been passed down as an oral tradition. That's what really got me into my project From d'Haïti, which first premiered with St. Paul Chamber Orchestra members of St. Paul Chamber Orchestra back in 2018, commissioned by Liquid Music Series and Kate Nordstrom. And that project was centered around uplifting the voices of female artists from Haiti who have long been overlooked. And that then turned into an album that I recorded with Spectral Quartet, a Chicago-based amazing string quartet you should check out. And there's a lot of oral history included in that, including the voice of my own grandmother. And that went on to get nominated for a Grammy, which was a surprise to me, but really wonderful. That project was a little bit of a catalyst, along with another project, which was a collaboration I had with a choreographer named Helen Simoneau, that was called Land Bridge, that was also about this sort of harnessing of one's heritage as a way of storytelling and understanding. A lot of my forthcoming work is really centered around identity, a lot of self-reflection, and examining my own inner voices. And that includes an upcoming commission with So Percussion, about to be having a double bar line any moment now duo for a guitar duo named Duo Noir, exploring how our religious and cultural practices connect to the environment and our own personal connection to the environment. That's coming forth in a project going to premiere in several years for Lorelei Ensemble. They are commissioning myself and Jason Troyding from So Percussion and Ken Thompson from Bang on a Can, each three of us, to really write pieces that are centered around some way that we are all connected to the environment. My way was, of course, understanding the rituals and practices that have been lost generationally in our connection to the environment and how to regain that. I am working on a very large scale, my first large scale orchestral work, commissioned by St. Louis Symphony, that I'm writing for them and their 120 piece In Unison Choir, which is a collective of chorus of Black church choirs from throughout the city of St. Louis. And I just finished the oral history phase of that, which was having conversations with so many of the members of the chorus, the youngest of whom was 20 years old, and oldest of whom was 90 years old, about their connection to St. Louis and its history as such a beautiful and historic, not only musical space, but as a historic space for Black people in America. And connecting with them has been really beautiful. And a lot of other projects coming up, more that I can't really think of. I think we should also mention that Amanda Gukin's going to be putting out her Forward Music Project album soon, in less than a month here coming up. And Allison and I were both commissioned to write pieces for that around, again, centering around stories of women. So that's who we are. That's what we do. That's what we've got coming up. And I think it's maybe a good time to open up the floor for questions if you have them. Otherwise, we can sort of expand on more that we do. But if you want to speak up or put your question in the chat, we are open to taking questions now. I see comments. Thank you. Okay. As performers or presenters, do you think we have a responsibility to look into the social context and morals of composers that we present? Can we separate music from personal beliefs and just take it as a standalone artistic product? Example, Wagner and anti-Semitism. Very good question. Very good question.
That's a very good question.
Ellen, coming in hot.
I know. I don't know. Let me jump in here and say that me personally, I think I think a presenter does have a little bit of responsibility, because if you have a presenter that knowingly presents a work that is very blatantly offensive to a group of people, like if there was a composer that wrote something that was like, I love the KKK, I would be really upset if they gave that person a platform, so I don't know. I can only speak for how I feel about it. I guess you can argue freedom of speech and all that. I mean, there are a lot of rights that we have that can justify bad behavior, but I personally would take issue with that, morally speaking. So.
I think that also in this moment, our industry is being sort of called to action and also called to speak up about what has been a practice in our industry and what has been acceptable practice in our industry. So I think that Wagner would have a very, very different career today if it were 2020 than he was able to have then. And I think that many of our systems within classical music have been upheld by white supremacy, have been, upheld by injustice, racial injustice, and has been largely exclusionary. And so I hope that people are going to be looking to their presenting organizations, to their funders, to their artists, and holding us all accountable for where we are at right now, and centering I feel like it is one thing to tell a story. I think it is another thing to advocate for hate through your work, or advocate for, or be exclusionary as in, who you want performing your work, who your work is created for. And so I would call it into question. I think there's a fine line between storytelling and honoring of history and understanding, and something else, which we're seeing now, even in this, even in the upholding of, for example, these Confederate statues or thing. Where's the line of honoring history and also something that is deeply offensive and sometimes untrue? I hope that answered your question, Ellen. I saw, Holly, that you have your hand raised. Well, Peter saw and helped me out to see that.
Yeah. I just wanted to thank you all for what you do. I mean, I've played the flute for a long time. I won't say how old I am, but I think the beauty of what you all are doing is that when I go to play music by Black flute players or Black people in general, I don't have the same doubts in my head that I have when I'm playing classical music of like, the style, all these things that were like, they don't feel like me. And so when I play your music and when my students see it, it's like, oh yeah, I know gospel, I know church music, these things that are familiar to us. So it provides a space to like play music that you feel ownership over, and it feels familiar, and it's not like you're an alien in someone else's like land, And so, yeah, I just wanted to thank you all for that.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
We have more questions. Going to Mike Zellers. What if the work doesn't espouse racist sentiments, but the composer demonstrates racist beliefs otherwise? This is kind of going back.
Yeah,
I'm like, Holly gave us this like huge uplifting thing. Now we're gonna go back. But I will say this, it's an issue that has come up, obviously, with many of the great entertainers, Bill Cosby, you name them, there are many of them out there. How do you separate the person from their artwork? And I personally feel that it is very hard for me to separate a person from their artwork. I know that for me, my art is a statement on who I am, actually. And that I try to I don't live a perfect life, but I try to really stand for what I believe is right. And I think that is worth uplifting. I think that a lot of space has been created for people who present themselves in a certain way, but live their lives in a very different way. And I do feel that in the arts, it is a responsibility to call that out for what it is. I think it's one thing to be a great artist, but I think part of being a great artist is living the truth. And if your truth is one that's harmful or hurtful, it's hard for me to buy into the work itself and to support the work itself. And I do believe personally that is a big part of how we landed where we are today, ignoring the morals and who the person is behind the actions that have taken place, whether they're good or not. And that has to do with a lot of our political leaders in history. It has to do with a lot of our religious leaders in history. And I personally, my answer to that is that I don't separate any part of an artist from who they are.
Ditto. Here's a
Deirdre,
different question. Yeah.
same question for philanthropy. Can we accept funds in the spirit of reparations or investment in communities who have been historically and systemically abused and their labor made that fortune possible?
Oh, wow.
Allison, you want to take that one? I feel like I've been talking a lot.
Whew, same question. Can we accept funds in the spirit of reparations? I guess I have a question about the question. When you say we, who is the we? Do you mean
the artists?
I think any artist or organization who are functioning as a 501c3 and contributed income as part of their revenue stream.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it would be true for a for-profit venue as well, thinking about investors. Just a friend of mine who is working in Jamaica, but she grew up in England. She's struggling with that around, some corporations are acknowledging their fortune was built on sugar plantations, and now they are apologizing, but basically the communities are saying that's not enough. You need to actually reinvest that money back in these communities now and let the people running them have that money. On the other hand, when you take gifts, you're giving people a huge tax break on their own fortune. I'm just wondering, I don't know that there's a right answer. I'm just curious about your thinking on it, or anyone else in the group.
Yeah. Thanks for asking that question. It kind of reminds me of like gentrification, and for example, like the Brooklyn Museum in Brooklyn being this like huge arts institution that is really like has a lot of responsibility in the gentrification and displacement of people who grew up in that area, who were raised in that area, who lived in that area for years. And it makes you wonder, like, okay, so, they've come in there, and like, what I want to know, like, what they are doing to like reinvest in the community, certainly. And I definitely think that they have a responsibility to do that, and to be active in like housing rights and things like that, because their being there has a huge impact, positive but also negative, for a very large number of people. I think when it comes to like funders, big funders who have a similar kind of history, where people have basically suffered at the hands of their profit. I don't know. That's a conflict. I mean, I'd like to believe that organizations are, I guess, or most likely businesses, like that, can turn a leaf, can change their ways. But I think if you're going to accept funds from them and have this consciousness, I think you also need to hold them accountable in the way too, or also see really what they're doing with the money. If they're not really putting their money where their mouth is, then no, you probably shouldn't take the money from them. If this is your position on things, if this is these are issues that matter to you and your organization, because otherwise you're not really helping the problem at hand, and if anything, just kind of like putting a Band-Aid on things, I feel. But yeah, that can be a very complicated thing, because I've been to the Brooklyn Museum many times. We've performed there. I've enjoyed it, and definitely, when the first time I went there, I didn't necessarily think about all these ramifications, that it's had on the community. And they have since done some things that have been like really questionable and kind of, not supportive of people of color, especially. So I have definitely in recent years, my children are running, sorry. I have definitely in recent years, been kind of paying attention to things like that when it comes to organizations and arts institutions that I want to support and be involved with.
Peter, I want to be mindful of time because I know that we're
Oh, yes.
30, but there were a few questions left. So I don't know if we should stop or answer people's questions, or
I
you
think we
allow
can,
it.
if you want, it's up to you for your time, because you're being very generous with your time. We have a session that begins at 4 o'clock with James Dargan, which is going to be very special too. So we could take a few more minutes if you'd like to continue asking questions. I know people are really excited to hear what you have to say about things.
Yeah. All right. We'll take just a couple more.
Yeah.
Teresa asks, as you gather people's stories, do you start out by saying this is for an artistic project, or do you introduce that part later and focus on building relationships? I'm interested in doing similar work, but don't feel confident about gaining community members' trust if I'm not already a member of this community. I can say from our experience, North Carolina is a great example of that. Neither of us have any history there, no family history, never lived in the South. That was maybe one of our first visits to North Carolina ever. And we were very open about it. And I think that for us, our criteria in going to Carolina Performing Arts was that we will not engage with this community unless we connect directly with community leaders and find a mutual benefit for us both, right? And establish a mutual benefit for us both. That really pushed Carolina Performing Arts to seek out who the leaders in the community were. And the truth is that every single community has somebody who cares about it, even if it doesn't look like anybody cares about it. There are people who do and have been doing the good work for these communities for a very long time. So each one of these relationships really started open and honest. They knew we were working on an artistic project, but we let them know that it was really about having their consent, seeing if the project was something that they felt would benefit their constituency, seeing if their constituents would be open to sharing their stories very publicly in this way. And if it was, almost everyone that we engaged with was like, yes, of course, the thing that we want is more people knowing about what we're doing because we need more support, because we want more people to know about the work that we're doing, which was really wonderful that this could be a vehicle for that. And we also were open about the fact that we wanted it to be about building a true relationship. We met people where they were at. There was the other than this is a project. Do you want to be a part of it? It was really about, it wasn't about getting them to do anything they didn't want to do, adding anything to their plate. Again, like one of the organizations, they sang Singing Valentines. That's what they were doing the day that we happened to be there. We went with them and sang Singing Valentines because we wanted to get an experience of who they were and what they really do. So it really is about meeting people where they're at. Getting consent, from them and an understanding about what's happening. And we found that being honest and open from the beginning was really, most people are excited to engage with you when you are open-hearted and honest. That's just the truth. And I think that, and when you're not requiring too much of them, I know Allison and I have both been feeling as artists of color right now, a lot of people are asking a lot of us in this moment, and that can feel like leeches coming at you too much at one time. But when people are more open-hearted and also just saying, this is up to you. This is not, we're not demanding this of you. If you would like to do this, we would like to do this with you. And many people are excited for that kind of exchange. So our experience has been that being honest up front, and finding right away where your mutual ground is a great way to get involved with community work. And again, having a one-on-one conversation with someone, you see very clearly what they care about and are able to share very clearly what you care about. And that often leads to mutual understanding and collaborative spirit.
One more.
We can do one more. Sure. Allison, I'm going in order, and Mike, we did a question here, so I'm skipping to Alyssa. What was your biggest challenge as you began the process of publishing your own work? What advice do you have for new composers starting the process of publishing their work?
Oh, that's a great question. I still find that the biggest challenge with publishing is all of the ASCAP reporting that needs to be done. And that is staying on top of the performances that happen all over the world when other people play your music. that is very hard to track down sometimes. It's not always that, you know, the artist reaches out to you and lets you know, but it's really important that it does get reported. Oh, and it's not always that the venue that the performance is presented in reports either. They're not necessarily obligated to do it. Some venues do, but it's really on the onus of the composer and or the publisher to make sure that it happens. Mommy's still on a Zoom call. Sorry. Anyway, so one second, I have a little girl here. So that is still, the straw sounds very big. That is still one of the bigger challenges, and keeping track of that and keeping a record of it. But it's like super insane organized. But it's super, super important. Just the managing of the store, I think we're definitely getting better at that, but learning how to, you know, build one that is user friendly and intuitive and easy to use is also very important, because you want people to be able to just easily find what they need. Here's some samples if possible, like look at perusal scores or little, you know, if they can. So just making sure that that is user friendly, you know, and inviting to people. And then
also, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, it's okay.
I was going to say also, don't feel like you have to reinvent the wheel. There are plenty of composers who are publishing their own work, and a lot of them doing it very well. We're still learning from a lot of people who are also doing that, and constantly, you know, going through evolutions of our own, and seeing how the landscape is changing, how we need to evolve along with it. I think we're at this point, even 10 years in, we feel like old fogies, so we're kind of always having to update it and on our own end. So, but I would say don't with all things in business and all things in entrepreneurship. I think so many people, especially young people, feel like they have to like completely reinvent the wheel. I think it's great to know that the wheel exists and has existed for a really long time, and study a lot of them, just like you study music and composition, right? Study a lot of them, see what they've done, what resonates with you, what doesn't resonate with you, what you think works, what you think doesn't work, and test it out. But there's a sort of blueprint for a lot of things these days, and I think that the blueprints all need improving constantly, but don't feel like you have to start from scratch. So that would be my second bit of advice in how to do it. Most of what we learned how to do, we learned by watching other people do it, and then tailored it to what we felt was, you know, a better system for us, or what worked more easily for us. Cool. I think maybe there are a lot more questions, and I feel really bad, and other comments and everything also, but
we'll just have to have you back again.
I know. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Peter. This has been really, really great. Yeah. Thank you all for your questions and participation. It's really great.
Yeah, and I'm so grateful to both of you. I know that we're so inspired by everything, and I'm just really. It's great that you could join us for this, and I'm already planning on next time. And Allison, we're gonna do that piece.
Some hell or high water, we'll figure it out.
Exactly. Yeah. Sometimes it feels like hell recently, but.
And also, please, everybody, stay in touch with us. You can find us all over the internet, both individually and as Flutronix, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. We're on all of the things: YouTube, SoundCloud, Spotify. Right. I don't know all the other things. We're probably still on MySpace. I don't even know if it's right. So keep in touch with us and follow us, and maybe even take some of your questions to us online on our own platforms, and we can totally have conversations there.
Yeah, thanks so much, and thanks to everybody for tuning in and for your great questions. And I've posted. We have great events coming up today and for the next 2 weeks. So I invite you to join us for that. And if you're able to help support us and what we're doing, we've been doing this since March, making great artists available to you for free. One of the things that we prioritize is paying all of our artists. Nobody's doing anything for free. We need to help support artists in this time. So if you're able to help us, we'd appreciate that. And hope to see you in 20 minutes for James Dargan, and then also Anthony Davis coming up. So thanks again. Take care. Stay safe. Stay creative. Thanks, Nathalie. Thanks, Allison.
Thank you.
Bye.